imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Southborough Community Preservation Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with the right and or requirement to attend the meeting can be found at the town of Southborough's website at https://www.southboroughtown.com. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch or participate in the meeting may do so in the following manner by finding the meeting at https://www.southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the Southborough's website an audio or visual recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of the proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. So with that, I call the meeting to order. Thanks everyone for this follow-up meeting, I'll say, and making the time with everyone's schedules and people on vacation. Much appreciated. So first of all, I had on here approval of minutes. To be honest, I hadn't read them yet, so I'm going to postpone that if everyone's okay with that one.
Yep.
And so next I'll go to, I just kept on the overview of the annual town meeting process. I think everyone is familiar with that. So we'll get straight to the review of warrant articles for the one that we really need to talk about is townhouse restoration and preservation. So Jennifer, can you make it so I can present? I want to do a brief recap for those who weren't there last time. David and Dorianne. So you can, I don't know, did you guys watch the meeting?
I did not. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's no problem.
It's on my list of to do when I get home.
Yeah, it's no problem. So let me do a quick recap here.
Okay. Thanks, Andrew.
Let me move this out of the way. All right. So we'll start with account balances. And Freddie, keep me honest if I miss something. So based off of the account balances that we have for this year, right? Let me go. So here, this is what we were talking about before in terms of surcharges and the match, right? So we have November state match coming in, which is 104,000. We have budgeted annual town meeting 2020. We're anticipating 54,000, an adjustment of 49,000. Because what actually came in was higher, so we're taking in 49,000 extra, or not extra, but that's what actually came in. So for fiscal year 22, right, the surcharge per the treasurer is $386,300. We're assuming a 20% state match, which is still conservative. And if we have to make an adjustment like we are this year, that's what we'll do next year. But you know, depending on what the funds are, you know, revenues for the state and everything, and if the state gives extra, you know, being conservative has been helpful in the past. So the total receipts coming in would be $511,551. So then we have the set asides, which is 10% to housing, historical, and open space, and then the 5% for admin, which leaves a total of $179,043, and then gets us to the budgeted reserves, which could go to any possible bucket of or project of 332,000. So that's what we're looking at for this year that we're anticipating. Questions on that? Okay.
Nope.
So let me,
Andrew,
yeah,
this is the shorter version that when I went through the long version a few meetings ago, people said they wanted to just know what was in after if all of the warrant articles that you've approved to go on town meeting were funded, this is what's left in all the accounts afterwards.
this is if everything,
Everything passes, because that is always your anticipation.
right.
This is what's left in all of the accounts that we took money from.
So-
Is left.
so I'm gonna-
This is what's left.
Yeah, I'm gonna come back to that one afterwards. So then, in terms of what we have for the account balances for this year going into what we're paying, right? So we have historic is going to get will be wiped out at the end after we do the library. That we could wipe it out even with, and I say wipe it out, it's that bucket of money that we set aside, which you see here in column D, is going to get depleted based off the funding for the library that we're doing. Open space, still going to have 51,000 there, that from the reserves, that's going to be, it's going to come through this year. So then at the end, it'll have what's already in there. So it'll have a bucket of 97,352. And housing, they're going to get their 51,155. It'll add to what's already there, so they'll be up to 410,264. And then for what we have for the unreserved balances, and I know there's two different buckets, but you'll see that. So the library is going to take from there, and the bell tower, which is already what was carrying over from last year. So balance available as until June would be $45,000 there. And then we have the budgeted reserve that has 247,120. But then we have Calander Field. It's going to take from that, and it's going to leave $8,370. And then the new budgeted reserve with what we're paying from the Burnett House, the trails, and historic would only leave $192,680, $608.60. So this is where it comes into play before we get to that the recap one.
Andrew, can I ask a question?
Yeah,
Is my internet bad?
no. Go ahead. Dorian?
She looks frozen now.
Is that a Disney movie?
Frozen.
All right, you're moving now, Dorian.
All right, Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought the bell tower was 300,000, not 276.
Uh,
Can you hear me?
Can I answer that, Andrew?
yeah, go ahead, Freddie.
Yeah, because the number's
is
off
thr-
on there. So I thought it was 300,000 and it says 276,
It is.
938 there. So I just want to know what the difference is.
We were required to put this on the same way it was on last year's warrant article. That's what we were told to do. Last year, we split it between two
Okay.
different funds. So if you go up, Andrew, you can see the same color up here in the reserve, which is the difference that will add in and make it the 300. What's that, 23,06176?
Yep.
I think that's the St.
Okay.
Mark's Bell Tower. And if you add those together, they should be 300,000.
Okay, thanks, Freddie. I just didn't understand the difference. Thank you.
And I just would like to say, if you're looking at this and it looks like there's a simpler way to do it, if you just started from scratch, there could have been, but we already had two warrant articles that were identified where they were coming based on other decisions we made last year. So that's just why some of them are a little split up in a way that doesn't make as much sense if you look at it as a whole picture this year.
Okay. So is everyone good with that? So we're just under $200,000 we had left over, right? So then when we get to the townhouse, and Dorian and David, this is where, you know, I think we really want to get you guys caught up. We had asked Freddie to work with the town accountant and Carla to make sure we got the right estimates for what we think we're going to have for new monies coming in, what the bonding capacity would be, and what that would look like as we go through. So Freddie added on for this one, so it's in one sheet, the 25-year bond, so we can look at it. You know, the big piece is that we can't, for a 20-year bond, the max we could bond out was to $147,000 based off of what we're already bonded. So with that, it limits us to just $2,030,000 for a bond for 20 years. Okay. And then if we do that, you can see what happens is, you know, based off of this is what we already are paying in column C, what we're paying to the Burnett House, and column D, what we're paying to the library, which is, you know, almost $2 million that we already have bonded to historical projects, right? And this would be another $2 million to a historical project. So you see the total debt here as it, you know, winds down. They added in this is what the surcharges, the amount that we're able to bond to, and this is what the available bonding capacity would be. Now, for me, as a longtime CPC member, this is important for me because it lets me see, like, okay, basically, you know, we're saying 75% of the surcharge, and the reason why it's 75% is you still have to do the 10%. Again, these are all bonded things to historical. So we're allowed to bond up to 75% because we'd be eliminating the set aside for the historical bucket, which is 10%. We still have to do 10% to the housing bucket and 10% to the open space bucket, and then the 5% that we'd have for the admin funds, right? So that's the 25% that we get to that we can't bond against because we still have. Now there's still the possibility, you know, or, you know, hopefully, fingers crossed, we still get a surcharge. But by doing this, you know, if we bond completely out, it means we're not going to be able to bond anything new until, you know, it's going to take a while to start building up, you know, really not until, say, 2029, where you have like $100,000 you could bond a significant project again, right? So, and then over here, you see that it's based off a 25-year bond where we could go all the way up to 2,200,000 for 25 years, bond that out. And then, it gives us, an extra almost $10,000 a year in bonding capacity. But you're paying for that, we're talking about another 5 years of almost $100,000 a year that we're continuing to pay. So, there's a reason why we're paying less to begin with. Now, so with that said, there was a lot of conversation. John Parent was on the call last time. I don't know, Jen, can you tell us? I assume that
He's here.
John's on, and maybe Jason. Is Jason on too?
Yep. And
Oh.
yeah, we have quite a few in the attendees tonight.
Okay. So, there was a lot of discussion last time. It sounds as if from the capital planning advisory and just overall budgeting for the town, the assumption was that we were just going to recommend this, and it was going to go to town meeting, that we were going to fund the entire thing. There was a lengthy discussion about, well, should we bond the entire amount? What if we don't? What happens then? So since we didn't have a full committee, we agreed to have one more review so we could have a full committee. And I think my understanding is Jason or John want to do a brief presentation or talk to advocate for it. So I don't know, Jen, is one of their hands raised?
Not yet, but I can bring in Jason and John.
Okay. Well, first of all, before we do that, David and Dorian, you guys all caught up? Any questions? Dorian's on mute, I think.
I'm
good.
I'm caught up. I also read through the minutes, and they were pretty detailed, describing what the issue was and what the discussion was. So I'm pretty caught up with what you shared.
Great. Okay. Let's see.
Andrew,
Yeah.
did you want to just confirm that there is enough funds in the unreserved accounts to cover the difference?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Good
And
point.
also
Sorry.
the 38 that we had kind of all forgotten about.
Yeah. So when I think before that last sheet I went to, I said there was about almost $200,000 left over before we funded everything else. So there is enough to bond and cover, even for the 20-year bonding amount to do the entire project. But, like I said, it leaves us with, I think, only $90,000 left for next year. And then, the bonding capacity of only $297 going forward for the first year. And then you can see how it builds through the spreadsheet. So technically, yes, there is enough. If we did do it, though, it's going to severely limit what we'd be doing, or could fund, not what we'd be doing, but what we could fund for future projects. In what I would view, at least until, if we wanted to bond something until around fiscal year 2029.
Can I ask a quick question before we get into the discussion with the attendees?
Yeah.
Is there any possibility that the town would consider increasing our surcharge from 1 to 2 or 3% so that we have additional bonding capacity in future years?
Freddie could probably talk best about this because she was originally one of the founding members to help get the bonding, get the surcharge for the town. It was a multi-year effort, I know, at the time. And at the time too, we were getting a 100% match from the state. So it was like dollar for dollar for the first 3 or 4 years that when we were doing the CPC, so it was a lot more favorable as
Right.
more towns took on the CPC, and bigger towns like Boston and, you know, I think Springfield has it now too. It's really depleted the rounds of funding that people get, and as you get to a higher percentage, it's like a second round of funding for this match that you get. So when so that's a long-winded answer to say, yes, it's possible. I don't think we could do it this go around because it's not a warrant article, and it would be a big effort that we'd have to put out there to advocate for it.
Okay.
But
Thank
I
you.
don't think it's something I think we as a CPC would advocate for the town, not that the selectmen are, they always give an opinion, obviously, on warrant articles, but it'd be something we would want to bring forward if we were going to do that.
Thank you. Yep.
Any other questions? All right. So Jen, you want to bring in?
Yep. Let me see.
And it looks like Lynn Spencer from the attendees has her hand up as well.
Yeah.
So I see Jason. Hi, Jason. Thanks for coming.
Anytime.
And John, thanks for coming.
Hey, Jen, you may want to bring Carla and Brian in, given just
Okay.
the conversation, if that's okay with the chair, given the conversation that we came into halfway through. I see Mark there too. I don't know if he wants to come in, but Andrew, I guess while Jen does that, you know, as you all of you know, I am the current chair of capital planning, and we're the ones that kind of started this process. And I know we've come before you a couple of times. John and his team, you know, in terms of the architectural team, have presented a lot of the details, but I wanted to kind of go back to where this started last spring. And as many of you know, capital planning is a new committee to the town in March of 2020. And at the time, we inherited a capital plan that was basically under the administration of town department heads, you know, supervised by the town finance team. And while they were doing valiant work, there really was no synergies between some of the projects that were being proposed. You know, you had department head A bringing project A, department head B bringing project B and C. And, you know, one of the things that we tried to do was, you know, not just look at next year, but look out 5-10 years, what this town may need or may want to make a decision on. And our focus wasn't just limited, as a reminder, to the general fund, which is obviously the number one bucket that impacts all of our taxes. It was to all funds, whether they be enterprise funds, CPA funds, revolving accounts, and then just general fund appropriations, to try to find a way to piece all of the town's projects together into one, as opposed to kind of taking a piecemeal approach every year, just saying, all right, this is next up on the list. It's been there for 5 years. Let's go. And the first thing we really honed in on was the townhouse. If you actually looked at the capital plan we inherited, there was about 6 to 7 projects related to the townhouse scattered over the next 4 to 5 years, starting with FY22. One of the projects, everyone's very well aware of how long this window discussion has been going on. But then the next project we looked at was the facade. And the background of our committee is primarily financial, but some engineering as well. And we all put our heads together and said, these projects are going to cost all of us less as taxpayers, regardless of funding source, by doing it all as one, as opposed to in individual pieces. And we know that based on recent projects, you know, one of which, you know, your committee was involved in terms of the golf course, in the portion that you all funded there. Bonding, you know, having gone out to bid on that project in particular, separate from the public safety facility would most certainly have cost more, right? Because there just was not two mobilization costs, two different contractors, potentially two different timeframes, in linking it all together. Definitely saved the town money, right? And I think you all know that just by how much you still have in surplus from that project today that you may be able to use for things that weren't previously envisioned. So, when we brought this project forward, we had studied the finances, and anyone that watches our meetings, we get into very nitty gritty details that only people that really like numbers really look at. And we just thought it made too much sense not to bundle it together. Now, I fully respect the authority of your committee to look at the merits of whether this is a CPA project, and believe that is obviously your job that you should be responsible for here. But on the bonding side, I would throw a few things out and would welcome any comments from the town's finance team, who I all see here. Is one, you're looking at this project in isolation as opposed to maybe prioritizing all the other projects that you may be bringing to town meeting floor. If any one of those projects fails, especially some of the ones that are six figures, that's an amount of money that if you believe this is an appropriate project, that could be used in year one to lower the actual amount that would ultimately get bonded. Two, in fairness to Brian carries some very what I'll call conservative interest rates, because he doesn't know what the interest rates are going to be until he goes out to bid. But you don't have to be you have to be asleep not to realize what the interest rate market is today on any project. And in the financial world, most people are saying people are borrowing money for free, because that's pretty much what's happening right now. So we likely, right, and I'm not advocating Brian change what he's done with his bonding schedule, but we are likely, just by simply bonding the project, to see a different number than what you're showing on your piece of paper that's favorable. Now, on the flip side, we also haven't bid this project, right? Because we don't know if it's going to go forward. So you're not going to spend all the money to do the final engineering drawings and go out to bid before you know whether the town's actually going to support it, not to mention your committee. So there's also, the potential that this project comes in under what the estimate that's been just, provided, right? The design team has done phenomenal work. I think, regardless of what your view is on the viability of the project, I haven't heard anyone in your discussions question, their competence or the level of detail or the thought that's gone into this project. So, when we take a step back, and I heard some comments in the last meeting of, could we use a piece of general fund for this or use it for that? We could, but at what price is that going to come for a future project? And, we have people on our committee that probably would call themselves preservationists, and some that probably wouldn't call themselves preservationists. But I think the one common theme we heard about this project, start to finish, was this is a building that is core to the town's operations. It's core to our town center. And, we could go put standard windows in with the general fund. We could go put, try to make the facade look nice. But if we just invested $1 million in the library that's at the bottom of a hill, and we have a beautiful building that sits at the top of the hill that clearly is in need of work, we can agree or disagree on how much maintenance has been done in the building over the years, but there has been maintenance. This is a fundamental decision of, what I believe is your responsibility to at least bring the project to town meeting floor for the town meeting to decide whether it's appropriate. Now, I get the bonding concerns, and I'll let Brian, Carla, or Mark, lean in on there, because they have a lot more experience both in this community and others. But if you think this is a potentially viable project that qualifies for CPA funding, then I think your responsibility is to bring it forward and prioritize it against the other projects that you're bringing forward. And I'm not telling you how to prioritize, that's your job. I have views, but my views are only one vote at town meeting. But I think, we should ultimately let the town decide whether this is a building we want to preserve. And I know when the library came up, there was a lot of discussion around people being surprised by the need to preserve it, right? And that kind of came in at the last minute, and there was a lot of discussion on town meeting floor. Here, we've already got the 5 sitting Board of Selectmen members to agree that there's no doubt that they would, sponsor a preservation restriction. We've heard no dissent from capital planning. Advisory has not taken a position on this yet, but a lot of those members have been very involved with capital planning. So, that's how I would kind of leave it is, we've thought a lot about this. We've thought about the tough questions. I think you're all asking the right questions. But I would also say those Excel spreadsheets are part of the story, not the full story. And, I've spent a lot of time with Mark, Brian, and Carla, who are our town finance team. They're who we pay to manage these numbers in and out for all funds of the town, not just CPA funds. And we've been assured that this is A, possible, but B, not going to necessarily handcuff us for future potential projects that may come in front of you that we don't all know about. And I'll close with this is we have looked ahead at future CPA projects and what we know about what we can see on capital plan, what may qualify. I'm sure Jen can speak better to this, but there's clearly some recreational fields that may come down the pike beyond Calander that you're sponsoring this year. But, I think you all know we're also looking at the schools and what may happen there. That's a critical component of what we're looking at for all demographics. When you hear us talk about schools, you typically would think school-age children, but that's our solution to the senior center. That's our solution to a community center. So we are trying to leave ourselves enough flexibility with general fund to fund those projects that may not be CPA related. But, the only other thing that's risen potentially, given the Board of Selectmen's vote last week is if South Union School is closed and sold, and a potential buyer does seek to preserve that facade, and that's how they choose to deal with that project, they obviously may be an applicant that comes in front of you. It won't be the town in that instance, at least as currently configured. But those are the only 2 things when we look at least town-owned properties that we can see in the offing that we're aware of. So that, I don't know if you want to go to the finance team, to add on to that, or you want to react to any of the comments I had.
I mean, Jason, I think that the first thing that I'd like to say is, it's kind of tough to look at, the townhouse in terms of how much is looking to being spent on it when we've spent so much on the South Union School, and now the selectmen are looking at selling it. So I think there's a concern there from a strategy overall for the town, from my perspective, right? When we're looking at fixing up a building that, there's always been a fraction of or I say not a fraction, a position of some town members that, hey, you should sell everything, build a new building and consolidate everything, right? And the selectmen seem like are going down that route now with the South Union School. They did it with the Peters School, right, to swap out to get the new fire station and everything. So, that's a concern. Another piece from my perspective is, like I said, when I went through the budget of where we're already bonded, is 100% historic projects, right? So, and I understand you're looking at it from your committee's position and everything. It's great that other people are taking a broader look at the town, what could be coming down the pike and everything. But, there are pieces like the Burnett House, no one saw that coming. And we were able to help fund that and make that happen and save that building. Now, there are other things that pop up that aren't necessarily on anyone's watch list that, without having any bonding capability, look at Chestnut Hill Farm, right? That's another major piece that couldn't have happened without CPC funds. There are other pieces of land out there that, same thing, might not be on anyone's overall capital budget, but could come up and the town really wants to save it. And we wouldn't be able to do anything if we fund this 100% if it came up next year. So that, I'll just say that from my perspective right now. And I know we're just looking at the numbers and we go a little conservative. And I think I've been very clear to the entire CPC committee that we do go a little bit conservative so that we're not in a hole. And that's benefited us in the past before, so that we did have extra money, going into the following year. And I appreciate what Brian's done and helped us along the entire time as we've gone through this. I think we've had a great relationship and consistent with how we've budgeted year to year. So that's just my perspective, but I'll open it to others. It looks like Ben wants to say something.
Can I react to the South Union, or you want to go around first? Because we were part of that too.
Why don't we go through, Andrew, what going to address the comments already made, and then before we move on to new material.
Yeah.
Could we do that?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So, I said at the last meeting that ultimately I'm pretty confident I'll be, voting to recommend this to town meeting, but admittedly, there's gonna be a little bit of nose holding involved, the reasons I gave last time. I guess one thing that I feel it's really important to address is that the CPA, the point of it is to have a funding stream that is independent of the usual municipal funding stream to fund the projects that typically fall off the edge of the table when folks like you, Jason, are going through the capital planning process. There are certain types of projects that always seem to get pushed off for a day when we've got a little bit more money. CPA was set up to have an independent funding source to address these needs of the community. These are the funds that we've used to help make Southborough a very special place. The crucial point I'm getting at is that requires that the CPA have some independence in its actions. So what I heard you say today, it sounds like some plans have been made for CPA funds, starting back several months anyway. We received some criticism, several months ago and before that, that we don't have a good handle on what's coming down the road. We've been asked by advisory and by selectmen at various times, why don't you know what you're going to be spending over the next 5 years? And we give the same answer every time, which is that, we beg and plead every year, usually around May or June. We have a PR blitz. We send correspondence out to every town committee, every town department. Please tell us what's going on. Do you see anything coming down the road that we need to plan for? And so that we can, as this independent funding mechanism, do our jobs and start making plans for this stuff. So, it sounds like these plans were being made and we were left in the dark, and it's now presented to us as sort of a fait accompli, and we're sort of backed into a corner where it's I'm going to leave it at that. We should have been involved at a much earlier time when the discussions began. We are sort of the frontline stewards of the CPA funds. This is what we're appointed to do. And like I said, I'm ultimately, given everything that's happened over the past year and the fiscal constraints that's posed on the community, I'll be voting in favor of this. I'm speaking as much to my fellow committee members here that our independence here is absolutely vital. We've got to protect it. We've got to be aware that we have it, aware how important it is, and we have to act to make sure that we don't lose it. And I would like to say that, we're here to work with everybody. Please, when you're starting to think about using CPA funds, please come and speak to us. The chances are we're going to have some pretty good ideas to help make it work for everybody. Thanks, Andrew. That's all I've got.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Mark?
I'm not going to reiterate what you both just very eloquently said, but I appreciate Jason's presentation, but it really did seem to assume that this is just another alternative source of municipal funding, and it simply isn't. It is a worthwhile project. I will be supporting it to an extent, But this is the type of thing that will, if we support it 100% and give everything that's asked, we are severely hamstrung for a long time, and that's just not right. It's not right, and I'll end it there.
Dorianne, do you have any comments or?
Okay, my internet is really unstable. I'm very sorry. I'm definitely here in the meeting, but you may not hear me. I support this project 100%. I believe that it meets all the criteria of what we're looking for. And I believe that this committee owes it to the taxpayers to put this forward and let them decide what they want to do. I've looked at the numbers. I believe that regardless of how tight we may or may not be, this is a critical project for the town. It is critical. This is our townhouse. This is what people see when they come into the town. I mean, we're talking about, the St. Mark's, the bell tower, and I'm against it. Everybody knows I'm against it. And we put that forward because it meets all the criteria. That was the critical factor that we put that forward. And I think that that's what we have to do with this. We should not be stopping this. We should be letting the taxpayers decide whether they want it's additional tax money. We pay into this fund. Our taxes go to this money. It is taxpayers' money. We owe it to the taxpayers. Let them decide. We'll figure out the finances. The money is there. I'm not worried about it. I've looked at the money. I think we're fine. We can't worry about what's coming down the pike when we have something so critical in front of us that needs to go forward. If we don't fund it, we're going to fund it another way. It's going to hit our taxes, and our taxes are going to go up either 4 or 5% to pay for this. I don't want to be sitting on the other side trying to explain to a taxpayer why we didn't use CPC funds to pay for it and why we voted to stop it and let their taxes go up that much. I don't want to be on that side of the fence. So I'm 100% in favor of this, and I'm hoping that, the other board members are going to be with me on this. I think the taxpayer should make this decision. Thank you.
I agree with almost everything Dorianne just said. Very, very well said. I'll just add that, this is a very critical building in our town, and of all of the projects that are in front of us for CPA funding this year, this project benefits the most number of taxpayers. Whether they are in the building or all of, so many of our town services are administered out of the building. It's just, I feel that it's a really, really critical part of our town. And I'll be supporting it to the fullest extent that I have an opportunity to.
Thanks, Ann. Jen, any comments? I think you're on mute.
Yep. No, I understand the sentiments of both sides. I think my thought lies on what happens with, I guess I'm concerned about over the next 5 years, are we going to be able to fund the trail here or there or those smaller projects? So it's going to come down to on town floor whether or not every single project passes. And if everything does, then I feel like the CPC is a little bit dead in the water for a couple of years, which is unfortunate. So it's just kind of a gamble there.
Okay. David?
Well, I think we've heard some very compelling arguments, both on the side of, do we have enough resources to do what we need to do, and what is needed for this particular building. And I don't think anyone disagrees that the work that's been proposed, and whether or not it's a CPA related item, I don't think anyone disagrees with that. It's more a question of, do we have enough resources to do that plus everything else? And I think it's something that we have to continue to consider.
Okay. So, and then Jason, the one thing I I want to make clear is I'm totally in favor of saving the townhouse, and there's no question on whether or not I think it's, eligible to go forward from a CPA funding. That's not at all the issue. The issue for me comes down as a steward for the CPA here in Southborough. Are we, like you saw earlier, $4 million of bonding, all for historic projects, is that fair across the board for the town from the CPC? That's my struggle. I'm not saying, as a CPC member. But of course, I would look to, save that building in perpetuity for the town. And that, that might be something too, that it could never be sold, would be something that I might look for in the preservation restriction. And the preservation restriction also that we've talked about, Jason, you and I, when you first came, we first talked about this, that was like, hey, it's a non-starter unless we're going to have a PR on that building. You're like, no, we're going to get everyone on board. Well, we're still kind of having trouble getting traction with the library. I know it might make sense to partner with the library and get whoever's holding the one for the library do the townhouse at the same time. But, similar to what happened for the golf course, I might suggest that, the wording for the warrant article is going to be, okay, it has to be on before, construction starts in the townhouse. The preservation restriction or the document has to be on the state's desk, so that means it's got to start moving pretty fast, and it's in perpetuity. The town owns that building. They can never sell it. I know that's not your decision or something, but then the selectmen would have to buy in on that. But, those are things that, things that are going through my head. If we're going to go to this extent, that I'd want to see that that building is going to stay with the town forever. So with that said, Jason, if you want to respond to anything.
Yeah, I think Carla wanted to speak, so maybe if it's okay with her speaking first, and then I'll round out kind of whatever the comments were.
Hi, good evening. I had sent out earlier this week a proposed spending plan and also a list of projects. And it looks like I started in July, and it looks like there's a lot of old CPC projects on the books. And I don't know if you guys have gone back and taken a peek at what's left, the residual of projects and things that could be closed out. But I was planning on this year using a turn back form and having your committee vote, which would allow more available funds for projects in the future. I wasn't sure if you had a chance to review that list, but that could be a funding source.
Yeah, I did go through that. I looked at it, and I talked with Freddie about that earlier. I mean, some of those had like the baseball field, the lights. I mean, that was a huge chunk of that money that's going to get spent. It still had a lot with the basketball court and the park, the Fay Park. All that money is being spent. So I think I agree. There's some cleanup that has to get done there. I don't think it's going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars when I looked at it, though, because it's going to be, because there was a lot of open projects still. But and that's something that we do periodically as well. We go back and say, okay, there's some for like the war memorial. There's still some, it's still supposed to have signage saying that this was funded by the CPC. We've been going back and forth with selectmen in the past about where that can actually be put on the war memorial. So
just an option, Andrew, just something to maybe fill your coffers, and I'll be sending those sheets through Freddie later on in the fiscal year.
And I think too, for me, the biggest piece is what I've been really pointing to. It's not the dollar amount that we're going to have left over, which is still going to be very low, say the coffers, like you said, but it's the bonding capacity for a big project. If it were to come, we wouldn't we wouldn't have any bonding capacity for real until I think it was 2029, fiscal year 2029. Where we could do like $1 million.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So I guess, Andrew, a few things on.
Andrew?
I couldn't see who spoke there. Someone call my name?
I did.
Oh, Dorian?
Jason, just being, I'm sorry. We're only in that tight of position if everything passes at town meeting.
Yeah, I mean,
Correct?
to Jason's point too, yeah, if everything passes at town meeting and depending on, but, so we'd have to, I think, for the first year, I think we'd have to put a warrant article out changing what we'd actually bond. I'd have to check with the CPA in Boston, but yeah, if we could spend down more, if one or two projects didn't get approved and we could use that money, that's a possibility. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Yeah.
So I guess, Andrew, I'm going to see if I can hit everything quickly. On South Union, capital planning was pretty involved with bringing that forward to the selectmen as well. When we started to look at the buildings of how we find ways to fund things that we know we need to do, whether it be, whatever infrastructure this town needs. And when we looked at South Union, the main reason that it's at the stage it's at is, one, its physical location in town is not core to the town's operations. And two, I know in particular, you and I had spoken about the playground. And we've actually identified not only a way to move it, but to keep it on the south side of town if that moves forward. So I know CPA had actually funded that, not too long ago. So we're trying to think about these little things too, so that like we're not putting investments into something and then ripping it down 5 years later, which would have been the case if we hadn't thought through that. So I get that number probably pales in comparison to any of the things you're talking about this year, but it's obviously a critical piece of infrastructure, especially the south side of town. So we've thought about that, but when we look at South Union, we also looked at what capital would be needed there. We had to kind of choose, right? We could have, given that that's on the National Registry of Historic Places, we as a town could have decided maybe we're going to invest in that building. Maybe we're going to come to community preservation for that building in terms of maintaining it, as a town. And it probably would have come at the sacrifice of the townhouse or recreation project or another historical project, etc. And then in terms of historical funds, yeah, I get that's where most of your bonding is, but I don't remember this level of conversation about the library. And in fairness to the committee that I'm here representing, if we were around back then, we probably would have prioritized the townhouse at the top of the hill for a preservation restriction in funding, especially given where the library stands in terms of grant cycles that they have, with the state to fund portions of that. So now we're still going to be stuck figuring out a permanent solution for the library in a couple of years and still have the townhouse issue on our hands, plus the existing library, which obviously has a bunch of deed restrictions, as you all know. And I think to Ben's comment, I don't know what more capital planning could have done to partner with CPC. So I went back to my emails while you were talking. We were formed on our first meeting was April 1st. We didn't even have a chair at that time. On May 11th, I sent an email asking what the timeline to your chair with a copy to Freddie, asking what the timeline is for CPA articles as we had one coming forward to the townhouse. I'm 99% sure, Andrew, that's when you and I talked pretty quickly thereafter. You kind of outlined some of the history, made sure I was aware and was thinking about the right things. We then again reached out on July 9th and then again on September 14th. And I went back and looked at the meetings you had posted, and I know you had a quorum issue somewhere in there. You didn't have actually enough members to meet, if I have my facts straight. I guess, we have a lot of regardless of where you vote on all of this. I think what I would also do, and you don't have to do it tonight because I get you probably have a full agenda after us, but we need to partner together to bring, we're trying to collaborate. We're trying to think through these things and help look ahead, right? To answer those questions that the Board of Selectmen and Advisory are asking you and have been asking. So we're trying to look ahead. And, I know Mr. Parent in particular worked his tail off and actually, I think, updated the CPA application himself this year so that we didn't have to guess when the deadline was. He just submitted it so that we didn't want to chance it because of all the attention that capital planning had given it. So, regardless of where you land on this, I would just, we're here to collaborate. And we also have an oversight provision that we want to collaborate with you because I know you spend a lot of time overseeing projects and things don't look the way they should and they don't come out the way, we have a lot of people on our committee that want to help. We may fund this for 2.2, we may fund it for 2, we may fund it for 1.8, but wouldn't it be great if we bring it in for 1.4, right? Ideal thinking, but there's a track record of that committee of bringing projects in under budget while still delivering top quality. So, we're here to partner regardless of your vote and, hope that you have the support to bring this forward.
Great. I mean, Jason, the one thing I think the townhouse is still eligible for some grants too, if it gets a historic registration as well, correct?
Yeah, and John had looked into that, and we are all hands on deck to help him submit those applications. I don't think we can until historic finishes the work around getting historic district, which goes, Andrew, just speaking as an individual, if that's what it's going to take to get more votes to actually, put a restriction on the sale of this property long term, let's bubble it up. Let's get that consensus if that's what it's going to take. But I don't know that we can start the PR work until we have funding. I don't know where who's going to fund the PR work unless that comes out of some administrative fund, because I don't think the town, given the size of that amount, but I'm happy to help. I think anyone else would be happy to help if we can, start to advance it and, stick to our word on what everyone's, saying here or wants to do.
Yeah, Mark.
Jason, I just wanted to add about the South Union School. There was certainly the playground issue, but a large amount of CPA funds were also used to replace the windows in that building. So the CPA funding is heavily involved in that building. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, I hear you. I don't know the history of John probably knows that much better than anyone else in this town. We looked ahead, and it's going to need a roof, it's going to need a chimney, it's going to need a heating system, the elevator. I could go on, right? It's, it was a delicate balance, Mark. I hear you.
I do think, to Jason's point, when you look at South Union School, yes, CPA did fund some projects down there, but it appears you didn't go the route we're trying to go at the town hall. We're trying to do it as a full package so we don't run into a problem down the road where, oh, this wasn't done, so now it needs to be done, or this wasn't done, so now it needs to be done. By packaging this in one night's neat package, we're going to really take care of the building envelope, which should buy you a very long time on the exterior of this building, deliver a product that looks the way it should look, and preserves it the way it should be preserved for the people.
I don't take issue with that. I just take issue with the funding source. That's all.
Okay. Any other comments on this one? Questions?
We have one attendee, Lynn Spencer, with a hand up. Do we want to let her in?
Yeah, please. Hi, Lynn. How are you? I think you're on mute.
I'm in outer space. You know, I have to tell you that I chair community preservation in my town, and I have really appreciated hearing this discussion because we're facing somewhat of the same issues, you know, deferred maintenance on buildings, you know, draws on CPA, tension with, you know, municipal projects versus private nonprofit projects. So I appreciate that sort of deliberation that's going into this. All I'd like to say is to reinforce what Jason and John and others have said. This is an important building. We took a holistic look at the exterior envelope, and it's a combination of certain features that are at the end of their service life, and the ability to actually integrate the project in a way that takes best advantage of, you know, staging, general conditions, overhead and profit, what it takes to have a general contractor on a job. To break this out into pieces over a period of time, and you've seen it in our cost estimates, will have a material effect on cost. It will cost more to push it out over a 3 or 4 or 5 year period. At the same time, I appreciate that this is a big draw on bonding capacity, and, you know, some limitation on the ability of community preservation to have the flexibility that you might want to have. But I'm here to answer any questions specifically about what we put together or some of any of the items that have come up today in today's discussion.
Thank you, Lynn. Appreciate it. Any other questions from the committee? So, Brian, while we have you, not to put you on the spot, but I know there was discussion before about the 20-year or 25-year bond. I'm curious from your perspective. You know, I think in the past I've heard that getting a 25-year bond is more difficult to get, or, you know, is there a challenge with doing that from the bonding standpoint, Brian, if we decide to go 25 years?
Yeah, so it's probably, excuse my cat, it's probably unlikely to count on a 25-year-old bond. It's a little longer than most terms are. We did that for we did an extended bond for the public safety building, but that was because the bond was so large. So in my conversations with with our financial advisor, it could be hard to market a 25-year, 25-year term bond with the amount of money that we have. So I would probably settle on a 20-year bond. That's the common one, and it's probably what we have to go with.
Okay. And then I assume you've seen Freddie's numbers. If not, I can pull up, I don't know if you saw them at the beginning, what we had for projected revenues coming in for the next couple of years. I can bring that back up if that helps. Do you agree with these numbers?
Yeah, I think she got them from me and Carla, so I'm good with the numbers. I think that's fine, the revenue.
Okay. Great. All right. So if there are no other questions or comments or anything, you know, the point of tonight's call was really to put together, and we have to move forward for what we are going to do with a recommendation for town meeting for the townhouse. So do you guys want to discuss what that motion would be, or does someone just want to make a motion? I'm opening it up to the committee for how you want to handle this. I feel that feels like there's a strong commitment to do the whole thing.
I agree. It seems like there's a strong commitment to the whole thing. I think funding 100% of it might be where some some of us diverge. That's my read on it anyway.
So I think I will go back to, and I think Jason pointed this out, and I think I'd had conversations with individuals before too. There's a possibility that some of the projects that we're recommending for town meeting don't get funded. So that does bring the, not that I'm advocating anything doesn't get funded. I'm just saying there's a strong likelihood some don't. And that would then open the possibility of, have to figure out how we do that afterwards. Say, oh, we had extra money. Can we now apply it to shorten the bond for the CPA, depending on how it's worded for the warrant article. But, we between, what might not get funded at town meeting, there's probably a couple $100,000 there that could still be used towards this.
Would we be looking to shorten that bond, or would we use that couple $100,000 towards next year's like applications and stuff like that?
Well, I mean, that's the tough thing. We'd have to see what happens afterwards. I mean, for me personally, if say $400,000 came up and we didn't have to, I think I would be in favor of using that right away to spend it down and free up bonding capacity. That's me. But
Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, that would require another approval of a warrant article through town meeting in order to commit that $400,000 to reduce.
That's, I just have to check I want to check with the coalition. We'll see what they say.
So your idea is there any way we can sort of preemptively accommodate that idea in our warrant article for the townhouse? Is that
right? If we could structure the warrant article in a way that it gave us flexibility, say, we're going to use CPCA funding, some portion, bond at a minimum this, but possibly more. I don't see what they say, or maybe we just have to bite the bullet for this year, and then next year we do a warrant article, say, hey, we want to spend down whatever it is and make it to free up bonding capacity.
Can I ask a question, Andrew? This is Freddie.
Yeah.
And I'd like to ask it of Brian. Typically, when we pass a warrant article, historically, I should say, it's a year or two before you actually bond it. Is that common practice, or is that just as the way it's worked out for the big bonds we've put out for the library, for the Burnett House, Chestnut Hill Farm? There were several years we were just paying interest before you actually put it out to bond. And we had the ability in the subsequent year to put more money in so the bond would go out for less. I believe we did that once. Is that a possibility?
Yes. That's a good point, Freddie. So typically with the larger projects above $1 million, we'll borrow it temporarily, and then, a note can go like a 1-year note, and you can roll it over for a certain amount of time. So possibly we could roll it over to FY, theoretically, we could roll it over to FY23 or even FY24. You'd have some interest payments, which would be, $20,000, $30,000 or whatever, but you wouldn't be making those large payments until possibly FY23, 24, maybe even FY25. So there is some flexibility there.
So just so the other committee members know, I'm not proposing you pay interest instead of paying down the bond, but how this came up is we found out we were paying interest before the bond got put out there for several years. And then we found out on, I forget which one, that we could actually start paying the bond off even though you hadn't put it out there. So we made a yearly estimate. We took your estimate of what a bond payment would be, even though there was no bond payment, and we paid it in 1 year to pay the bond down. I'm just saying, I don't think in my opinion, it's not wise to go to town meeting betting against one of your warrant articles in another warrant article. So if it doesn't pass, what I'm saying is to go to town meeting saying, oh, we can't fund everything, but if something doesn't pass, we want to take that money and already allocate it. I don't even know if you could do that. But what you can do if something doesn't pass, then at the next town meeting, you can use that and make the bond not be as expensive. So it's the same thing, but it's paying it down.
Could we amend the warrant on town floor, say if the other articles don't pass and they're voted on before the town hall?
So, Mr. Chairman, what Annie just kind of said what I was going to say. You can always make sure that you structure the warrant so that you take the townhouse after some of the other articles, and if things don't pass, you can always amend the motion. Now, I know that historically, CPC's articles, the motions have always mimicked the article itself. There really hasn't been a change. But you could always amend the motion if in fact things don't work out the way you think they do, to realign the funding.
You can do that, but you can't increase.
We can't raise it. Yeah.
You can't raise the dollar amount on the floor.
And I think Mark, that's in line with what you're saying too. So if we did fund the entire thing, and if there was something else didn't pass, Mark, I think what you're saying is we could amend it on town floor, not changing the overall dollar amount, just the buckets or the
Just change it. Yes, I'm not advocating, to change the dollar amount, but you could advocate, you could rearrange the buckets and do it that way.
Right. And just to be clear, I'm not advocating that we shoot down any of the warrant articles that we already have. Just trying to do planning and prepare the committee for what options could be if we do the full dollar amount. So,
I'm going to throw out something else. The number we're working with for the entire project is $2,238,284. And I'm not in favor of funding 100% of it. I am in favor of funding most of it. I think the town, the general fund should have some skin in the game. And if you were to eliminate, if you're looking at the proposal, basically eliminate the roof, DIV 6, 7, 8, and 9 totals $288,495. If we didn't fund that, we'd be funding $1,949,789. It's a little bit less than 10% of what they're asked. And I don't think it's too much to ask for the general fund to step up to the plate, because this is, in my view, largely a deferred maintenance issue. It's true in every municipality. I understand that. I'm not criticizing anyone. We're faced with this situation, but that's what I'll throw out. I think that's a reasonable compromise.
So Mark, what if the compromise was that we fund the entire thing, but the PR requires that the town can never sell the building and it's always part of town property, as long as it can never be torn down?
I think the PR is a deal breaker. I don't think this thing should be passed without a PR.
Well, there'd be a PR, but if it could never be sold.
I don't think that's enough.
Okay.
You could look at it and say, well, we'll fund 90%, but I'd rather stand on principle and say, well, the roof, is that really restoration? Isn't that really maintenance? Why don't we carve that out and fund 90% of this and have the town step up to the plate for the $228,000? I don't think that's unreasonable.
I don't think that this committee should be deciding what we should change or cut out or alter in this. I think we should fund it as stated. They've worked on this for so long. They've had experts look at this. They've decided this needs to be done. It's an important building in the town. And Andrew, I'm ready to make a motion to fund this. So if we can, if the discussion's over, I'm gonna make a motion.
Can I just add one thing in that you haven't discussed yet? If you have a preservation restriction, which is a requirement, there's a cost to that, and that's not included here. Where's that funding going to come from?
Yeah, there'll probably have to be another.
And my suggestion is not to try to dictate anything. It's largely to keep us having some flexibility, just like the capital planning committee wants, some flexibility in case future projects arise. That's what motivates it.
May I speak to Mr. Murphy's point? If the town was to pick up the price of the roof, unfortunately, budget season's about done. This hasn't been accounted for anywhere. And in a project like this, the roof is where you start. You're going to work your way down. So that would really hamper this project as a whole. Again, the goal is to do this as a package. And to circle back to Ms. Gillespie's point, with any luck, if we get some good bids coming in, we may be able to pay for the PR through the contingency fund. You know, the goal is when you have a budget number like we have, that, you know, Icarus isn't flying too close to the sun. So with any luck, the contingency should be able to cover that.
Well, I mean, with
Good old
the way we're thinking about structuring the warrant article is you'd have to pay for the PR before you even do the work. So
if you were to word it that way, Andrew, unfortunately, it would really hamper the project. The goal is to get the money and go as quickly as you can. I don't like dragging out projects, especially when the economy is getting better. The sooner we get to it, the better price we're going to get. As I mentioned during the last meeting, with recovering economies, there is inflation. Inflation
no,
results
I
in higher
understand,
prices.
John. I get it. It's just the only problem we have is people seem to forget the need for the preservation restriction once the project's done, and they're on to the next thing. I'm not saying that's you. I'm just saying that's our experience that we've seen in the past. And you know, that's what happens. So that's why with the one piece for what happened with the golf course, you know, a town member came to the planning board and said, you should not, you know, move this forward. And the planning board structured the approval saying they couldn't use occupancy of the firehouse until the PR was on the state desk. Now Jason worked diligently, got it. There was no problem. Went off without a hitch, but there was a hook in there to make sure that got done. And you know, we can't really do that with a town building where it's going to be occupied the whole time. You know, I think, you know, I would want some assurance that that's going to be done before, you know, the project is even halfway complete, that the PR is fully in motion. I mean, not.
Can you just simply write it into the deed? I've heard that other towns simply write them into the deed. That could get you an almost obediently. I would guess that town council should be able to do that relatively quickly with the approval of the Board of Selectmen.
Right, but the preservation restriction goes beyond where you have an outside entity who's actually going to come and check to make sure that you haven't broken the preservation restriction and put on, you know, in 10 years, vinyl windows and be like, hey, you can't do that. And it could actually hold the town accountable. So it's not just putting it on the deed.
Doesn't the preservation restriction also require some ongoing monitoring to see if there's maintenance needs?
Yep.
That's kind of big. And do we have any idea what that'll cost, Andrew?
Well, I think for the library, Lynn, what are they coming in at? Like, it's like almost $100,000. Then you're on mute.
I believe that Freddie has been in touch with organizations like Historic New England that have a preservation restriction program. And, you know, the minimum to enter that program is $60,000. They'll structure the amount based on, quite honestly, the extent of the preservation restriction and their activity. So I don't have that number at the top of my head, but I'm certainly aware of that there is a fee associated with it.
Yeah.
We actually, sorry, may I say something?
Mass Historic, I believe, was on the lower end of the spectrum from what
Right.
we were looking at. Was it Mass New England or New England Preservation that we had that meeting with? It was higher. They had to come out and everything, and they actually set some funds aside in case they had to go into a legal battle with the entity to make sure that it stays preserved. So.
May I,
So it
may I
depends
add
on who
something?
you go with, but it can go, so say at a minimum, $60,000 up to much more than that.
Andrew, you know, having been part of, obviously, in your planning board role, the public safety building one, which I think is the one that probably had the most planning around it in terms of the teeth that planning board put into the process to hold everyone accountable. I mean, I look here and I see 3 town finance team members, including our town administrator, that basically occupy this building every day, you know, especially when we come back from the pandemic. And you have the facilities director also, who's a compensated employee of the town. This meeting is recorded. I would suggest, you know, subject to the BOS, right? I think there should be a letter from your committee, if this is what you want to do, to the BOS and get them to document it in meeting minutes and come to some sort of memorandum of understanding. But John's point on the bidding here, like, yeah, we need to go out. If this is going to actually pass, we need to be like ready to go with our bid packages and not be, you know, potentially subject to the state's timeline. Because then we're probably going to lose a construction season is my best guess. And I would love to see some sort of collaborative memorandum of understanding that it's very clear this is the town's, you know, will, where we're going, hold people accountable for it, but also not cost us more while we wait for other government entities that we have no control over their deadline. Because Mark, you could correct me if I'm wrong. The only reason the golf course went as quickly as it was is, you know, you had maybe state representatives leaning in on the Department of Energy or whoever else holds these, right, to push this thing forward and get the proper paperwork in place. I know there was some legislative action as well to deal with the actual land swap, but.
Yeah, that's correct, Jason.
Actually, I'm going to speak here as the person who worked on the CR for the golf course. We had a lot of trouble getting even a committee set up to work on it for months and months and months. So that was held up, even though it was required in the warrant article to be filed by, I think it was June 30th. They didn't even set up the committee till a couple months beforehand. So past practice shows that the CPC is well within their reason to be concerned that something isn't set in place. And I say that as someone who worked on talking with the libraries going back to 2018 that a PR was needed. And where are we there? So you need to have something set with some teeth in it, which for the golf course, the only teeth that there was from a permit from the planning board, which had nothing to do with the warrant article or the requirement. So, and I'm saying that as a citizen past member of this committee.
I was a member of the golf course CR committee also, and in that case, the CR needed to be approved by the EOEEA. In this case, it's Mass Historical, and you know we don't have any control what happens once it lands on their desk, but we can fix a deadline by which it must be submitted, with the understanding that they typically come back with comments and so forth that we need to address. But prior to the start of this discussion, I had in the back of my mind, we would sort of calculate a date as, within X number of days after the achievement of substantial completion of construction, which is sort of in the industry when 95% of the work has been certified complete by the architect, as they call it, substantial completion, within 90 days or something like that. But Andrew, I take your point, and Freddie, yours also, that we actually did kind of have language like that with the golf course CR, and the deadline was missed.
I would just point out in our conversations with the library, and I know they're ongoing with the state, which is the best place to go if we had that historic district. And, we did the library how many years ago? It's too bad that that hasn't moved forward. I don't know. I've not heard one thing about who's working on it or what's happening. If that was there, we would not only be eligible for a $50,000 grant towards the work. The bigger benefit was they will hold the PR, and they don't typically hold it for properties that they don't give grants to, but I understand the library's working on that. I would suggest that working with the library to make this a twofer, because when we also talked with was it New England Historical? I might have the name wrong, but they said that it would be more affordable if you did both the library and the townhouse. And that conversation happened last December. So if there's savings to be made there, like the question is, if we're talking about a PR and that's been in the knowledge for months now, has anything been done? And if not, it's kind of not really fair to tell the CPC you can't hold it up by wanting to have action on it when there's been.
Freddie, how can you do a PR when we don't even know if you're going to bring it to town meeting floor?
I think you can have conversations.
It's a waste of money.
Yeah, that's you have a good point, Jason. I mean, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? So yeah, you could argue that if the town was really serious about saving the building and doing everything else, that maybe they should have put a PR on it years ago, right? So, I'm not going to get into. I see your point, Jason, and Freddie has a point too, that it has legs. So, is there anything else other than the fact that I think the point of there would need to be funding for the PR, in my mind, I'd almost be in favor of increasing a little bit more for the contingency to cover, hopefully that there would be some, you'd be under budget for doing the building, but give a little bit more for the contingency to add to a preservation restriction. That's where I'd be at. But any other discussion on this before we move on to entertaining a motion?
I think, Andrew, if I may, I would be more inclined towards funding the full amount, but have that be inclusive of the cost of the PR.
Okay.
I'm in favor of that as well.
It just, I may have not spoken perfectly clearly, but by the full amount, I mean the 238 being sought, but within the warrant article, making that inclusive of the costs of putting the PR on the building.
For in perpetuity to the town.
So what if the money exceeded it? Where does it come from? They'd circle back and ask us for more, is what would happen.
Well, I think, Mark, the library is currently under budget. The fire department or the safety building was under budget. I think from what I'm hearing from the experts that are before us is they're hoping with the current market and everything, and if they can get going quickly, that we should be under budget. If everything goes favorably, I mean, they do have a good track record. So the anticipation, I mean, you look at the golf course, right? Even the golf course is under budget, and we can are looking to add on what was originally requested, the putting green. So I think I'm comfortable with going with Ben's suggestion.
Andrew,
But I think we do have to go with a 20-year, and I'd be in favor of the 20-year bond based on what Brian said as
Agreed.
well. Because I don't want to hamstring the town, specifically Brian and his team, with any unduly, unwieldy loan requirements. So
I think we still haven't hit on some method for ensuring that the PR is prepared by a certain milestone in the project. And my feeling is, that I feel like we should address that within the warrant article.
yeah, I think we can get to that. I think the first piece is the for the non-committee members here, I think they're wondering if we're going to fund it. And I think we can work out those details in the warrant article. We had that later in the agenda, I think, just to work out the warrant article itself. But I don't really want to talk about the warrant article if we're not going to fund it.
Okay.
So.
Thanks.
Yep. So was there a motion?
I was gonna make a motion, but I'm not sure that I'm doing this correctly, so please correct me. I make a motion to fully fund the restoration of the townhouse for the amount of $2,238,284 from CPA bonding the project for 20 years. I don't know if that covers everything.
With the with a preservation restriction. So the motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Okay. So discussion. I think the one amendment that Ben was requesting was that or Mark, that the preservation restriction be added to the full amount there that you suggested during, or you made the motion for, that would be part of the full funding, that the preservation restriction for preserving the building exterior, facade and roof in perpetuity. And I would want it to say that the town could never sell the building.
I like that. I agree with your suggested amendments.
Okay.
And this is, just to clarify, this is a motion to move it to town meeting, not necessarily to fund it, right?
Well, it would be
Like,
right. We are making the recommendation to town meeting floor for the full amount with those stipulations.
and then the town will decide.
And then the town decides whether
Yep.
or not to approve and go forward. So we make the recommendation. Now, I'm not sure, and I know Jen, Ann, and David, so the first time you're going through it, what was touched on earlier, on town meeting floor, if something came up, we could actually lower the amount if for some reason, if Jason said, hey, look, it came under, we only need $1 million, we could lower it. I know that's not going to happen, Jason. I'm just saying, for example.
Not before town meeting. It will maybe happen on the back end, hopefully, but
right. So, but we could lower it, but we can't raise it.
Right.
But as Mark pointed out too, if something else were to happen and, say we found that something didn't get passed, or someone wanted to pay off the Burnett house and we didn't have to pay that bond anymore, and there were, new funds, it'd be great. And then we could use that money for this. We could adjust that, but we can't, whatever that 2,238,000 yada yada yada. we can't go any higher than that, is what we're saying. Okay.
So what do we want to estimate then to add in for the PR?
So I think what I can't remember if it was Ben or Mark was saying, we're not going to estimate anything new for the PR. The assumption is that it's going to come out of what's already in there for the contingency and what they can drive it under budget from what they put for the 2.238. And they're going to, that's going to fund the PR as well, because they're going to do such a good job with.
Okay.
keeping
And so
all
the
that.
contingency was like 10% of that? Just to clarify. I was trying to dig to find the numbers and I can't find it tonight.
Trying to see here.
Could I speak?
Lynn's right, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we
And
carried
it's
a
15%.
we carried a 15%. Yeah.
I just have a quick question. So I'm in favor of that no sale contingency. But do we or do members of the town that are voting on this have the authority to put that restriction on the town property?
That's one thing. Aldo's going to look at this and review it anyhow. So I think and I'll double check with the coalition in Boston. But I think it was in perpetuity. Can we sell the golf course? I don't think so. Mark, do you know?
I don't. I don't think it'd be easy if we wanted to be honest with you, but I don't know if you actually could.
Yeah.
So I'd leave that to council to figure out.
So Freddie, you have your hand raised. Do you want to say something?
So Andrew, what happens if Aldo comes back and says, no, you can't put that restriction on a town building?
Well, then I'll have to discuss it with all of you and tell you we gotta change it. But I'll check with the coalition in Boston and see if we can do that.
All
And
right.
I think, again, if you're asking for CPC funds, and I think, no offense, Jason, but with what's happening with the South Union School, if we're going to spend $2.2 million on this town building that everyone's telling us it's going to be around, there's no changes to move out of it and everything, which was exactly what we heard with South Union School. Mark, you were there too. Oh, there's no changes. We're going to put the splash pad in, or there was a splash pad they wanted to have along with the playground and everything. That we're not going anywhere. We're going to make sure this is a fixation for the south side of town. And now look where we are, right?
I'm not offended, Andrew. I'm only one vote, but I feel like we've done our homework on this to get the right parties up front on board with that same premise. So I think we're just approaching it very differently than maybe others have approached things in the past. I can't speak for the past. I can only speak for now, and I understand where some of the reservations are coming.
Right. But I mean, I think that if any town building we're going to save in perpetuity, I think it's that one. I'm not saying South Union School. It's the townhouse.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully, there won't be that much pushback on it, because otherwise, if the alternative is like, okay, you say we can't do it, we think we can, then maybe you don't want to do it that way, then find another way to fund it.
Andrew, I know that Capital is working with some members of school committee and taking a look at school buildings and things like that. Even if something like that comes to fruition and we move municipal operations into one of those properties, the townhouse is never going away. The townhouse is always going to stay. I don't understand, or I can't envision any scenario under which the town would not keep that building.
A little more reason to make sure it doesn't happen. Should be a non-issue.
Yeah. So there was a motion, it was amended to include the preservation restriction and in perpetuity owned by the town. Okay, everyone agree with the amendments?
Yes.
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 Okay, so we ready to vote? We'll go with David first. I'm going by the order I see you on my screen. So just so we're clear, David,
I vote in favor, yes, of the motion.
Ann,
Yes.
Dorian,
She's
Dorian, I
frozen.
can't hear you.
Frozen.
She's on a Disney ride in her head, I think.
Yes.
She's
Yes.
a yes, we heard that. Dorian's a yes. Jennifer,
Yes.
Mark,
Reluctantly, yes. I still think,
Yes. Sorry.
the town should throw something in, but I'll go with a yes and perhaps address town meeting.
Ben,
Yes.
and myself, I'm a yes. So, it looks like we are looking to fund we are saying CPC warrant article 8, 100% as requested, with the 2 caveats that we added. So I think Jason, John, Carla, Brian, Lynn, Mark, thanks for coming.
Thanks. If there's anything we can do to facilitate those, Andrew, or help you, just don't be a stranger.
Oh, don't worry. No, thanks for coming. I think now we just got to work on, you know, how we're going to break it out. And again, we're going with the 20-year bonding to make it easier so we can get it out there to somebody. So, okay. So next item, let me look at the agenda here for warrant article. So the warrant article itself, Freddie, you still out there? Let me pull this up. One second here. So this is what we had as a draft before. Can everyone see it?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So to see if the town will vote pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 44, as amended Chapter 44B, or any other enabling authority to appropriate.
You guys hear me now?
Yep.
Oh, it was my microphone. I thought you were just ignoring me.
Oh. Not to exceed. So we're going to put. Why can't I edit this?
That would be 2,238,000. I can fill this in if you talk about it and then send it out again.
Oh, I got it.
You got it?
So 2,238,000. And then what were the final dollars?
284.
284. So 20 years.
You actually have to change this. I'm going to have to rewrite it. Because the bond is for less. That's the total amount.
Oh, up here.
It's the 238, 284.
That's right.
And then it says, before it says for a period of not less than, I think maybe cutting and pasting that got taken out. It would be a bond. Sorry, this is what it says, Andrew. That would be the one, how much is it for the 20 years? Is that 170?
Yeah, I think so.
100, you have to go to the other spreadsheet. I don't
It
know.
is. It's a smaller amount. You're right.
I think it's 170. I'm sorry, it's 2,2030, right? That was what it was.
2030,
Yep.
right
Yep.
here, right?
Yeah, that's what the first number is. Sorry. So this is the bonding amount.
Okay.
Shouldn't we also make reference to the upfront money?
Yeah, that
we're-
comes next. So then it says that's for 20 years you're going to bond, right?
Right.
Then it goes additionally to appropriate, and these are from the accounts, and you're going to have to decide which accounts. So it's a two-parter. So we have the general unreserved, and there's going to be a second account. Can you go to the spreadsheet? Can you go down to the right here? So you'll have, keep going a little bit further. So you can take 100,
192.
60860 out of the fiscal year budgeted reserve.
Let's work with round numbers, right?
Yep.
Freddie, but over here, we talk about specifically what the contingent amount is.
Yeah, was that in the application?
I don't have the application up in front of me. Someone have that? I know, Mark, you said it was 15%, right?
Lynn said it was 15%.
Well, are you guys, do you want to do this tonight? Or are you comfortable with Freddie and I working out the numbers and everything, and then
As long as the numbers add up.
to the 2.23?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
I'm comfortable with you
We
working the
don't,
numbers.
we don't have to watch you guys do this live.
Okay. All right.
Andrew, do you want to scroll down a little bit to the and further? So this a lot. No, I'm sorry. I was reading the paragraph that starts in further.
No, and further.
So this allows them to, you have to have language in to allow them to apply for grants. And if they get the grant, this is how they can spend it. So that's the first part of this. And it also says if they get the grant, it has to go into the community preservation accounts. So that's all pretty established legal lease from other warrant articles. But then at the end of that paragraph, it says, well, I guess it's in the middle. The Board of Selectmen shall grant a perpetual preservation restriction. And I wanted to just make clear why it says perpetual, because you can put a preservation restriction on that's only good for 20 or 30 years. Mm-hmm. So that's the perpetual reason. And I added the historical facade and put the windows in there as well. Aldo's going to have to look at that because where they're doing the restoration on the windows, that gets a little.
Is there sandstone that's over and above the historical facade? I mean, some of the, and should that be preserved and mentioned? I don't know the answer to that, but.
Well, it's the exterior of the building.
Do you want to?
Facade.
I always thought the facade was the entire exterior.
I don't think it is.
So I will ask tomorrow and get an answer and put whatever is required there, if you're amenable to that.
Yeah.
And then it would say the general laws, blah, 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 as necessary. So then I went a little further. All of the work comply with the building and architecture. That's a requirement of PRs to the type of work you can do. And that's what they've already proposed. And I got this language this is the only thing different from last meeting. And it's sort of repetitive, but said appropriation contingent. And this says to be filed at the registry of deeds prior to the commencement of any work on the building or the expenditure of any funds from this appropriation. Now, you just talked about how that wasn't really feasible, but you have nothing. The agreement has to come from the selectmen, doesn't it? Didn't they talk about a memorandum of understanding? And so you need to decide what you want, because when it's in the warrant article, that's the only real teeth you have. Unless you're not going to submit this warrant article until you get a memorandum of understanding legally signed and, recorded somewhere.
I kind of like Ben's idea of like when it's like by the time it's like 95% complete. So it could let them get started and rolling, but they're not allowed to be like, they can't be done until this is on it.
As a possible alternative, maybe even shall be submitted to Mass Historical within 180 days of the commencement of construction, because the work certainly won't be done by then. And that would get it in place before the work is finished. That sort of just occurred to me. But I think Fred is right. We need to have something in the warrant article.
Yep.
Freddie, I forget, did you talk to Stuart? Did he say if there was any guidelines, typical guidelines about this?
No, he gave me that last paragraph and he said they're not in the business, they're not, I want to be careful. I'm sure he wants to be careful. He goes, they don't typically write warrant articles or provide advice. That's up to your legal counsel to review and advise you. But he gave us this language if we wanted to go that way. So you could switch it so that it's not approved by. So one of the things what happens if they don't approve it? So, or if it takes extra time to approve it, the only reason it doesn't get approved is because it doesn't protect. So there's two components to this. Is first you have to find someone willing to hold it. And is that something that you could put that being a first step, and then, or that makes it too difficult? Just, I like 180 days. And you have to withhold some sort of finishing the project or funding it, but the problem is you can't have people work on something and then not pay them. So
what if we said 220 days?
220 days?
Yeah.
Versus 180?
Yeah. Not a full year. It's getting closer. It's going to take longer than a year to do this, right?
Did they give us a project timeline?
Well, I mean, the windows, look at how long it's taken with the Burnett House where they were doing all the stone work on that. Right?
That has nothing to do with.
But the stone work, the roof.
Well, the library, and they're whipping through that.
I agree. I don't want to hog tie or slow the project from starting. Or we just say we won't pay, maybe we just say this, like, we won't pay the last 25%. I say 25% because there's the big skin in the game until there's a preservation restriction. And then the town has to pick that up. Once the whole thing starts, if we don't pay it, the town has to eat it.
You can put that in and know that, especially for the newer members. Aldo will look at it. The selectmen are going to weigh in on it, advisory. And if that's not feasible, they're going to come back and make counter offers, right?
Right.
So I would say put what you think is the most fair to allow the project to move forward, and then see what comes back.
So 25%, we're talking about $500,000, right? So we could go even lower, say
I
15%.
think the money, withholding the money though, hurts the contractors, right? Doesn't actually impact the people that need to get the PR, right?
Now the town still pays it. I mean, that's the thing. Like everything that we were doing with the basketball court,
right?
The town, they still got paid. It's just
Actually,
like they need.
This gets more complicated because it's a bond. You have to make your bond payments. So the only thing you can withhold is the additional cash in the CPC accounts. Because, I mean, I guess you could not pay a bond, but
No
that's
contingency funds will be,
it's not the contingency you want to be holding back, because they're not supposed to touch the contingency anyhow, that's another story. But I mean, the plan is not to use the contingency unless you have to.
Well, we're using the contingency on this PR, right?
Potentially.
So, yeah. I guess I feel like if we were to put in there like that, you know, like it needs the PR within 180 days of like project beginning, that seems fair. If something happens in the end, like they're in progress and it's not going to hit that deadline, then obviously we can have those conversations. But yeah,
I think that sounds good. I just wanted to also touch on your comment about the town not selling. You want to put that in somewhere. I highly suspect that's not legally allowable. I don't know for sure, but I will say, you asked about the golf course. When you have a conservation restriction or a preservation restriction, that stays with the building, so that it doesn't matter who owns it. You can buy and sell them, but the restriction stays. That's why it's so important, so that if the town were to sell this building, that's why you want a reputable organization to hold it, because they're going to defend it. They're legally required to, and that's why it costs a lot of money, because they put money aside to defend restrictions that get broken. So it almost, if you have a really good restriction on it, what difference does it matter if the town owns it? Same thing with land, conservation restriction. What restricts it is the land. I mean, it's the CR, not who owns it. So you can put that in there, but if they come back and say you can't restrict who owns a building, which seems a little bit likely you can't, but who knows? That's why you want to make sure you have the strongest PR and the best holder of the PR possible. And do you want to put in there that you have oversight of who holds the PR? Do you want review? They keep talking about having a land trust hold a PR because legally they can. I mean,
I would say a resounding no to a land trust holding the PR.
But if you don't put
I
something,
would, yeah.
if you don't have something
I'm
in here, you have nothing
really,
to
really
say.
hopeful. I would be very much in favor of us having input onto the selection of the holder of the PR. You know, that requires a vote of the CPC to you know, to give our agreement to the choice. And I guess as an aside, I really, really hope it can be held jointly with the PR, the library, the same organization, so we can get some economies of scale there.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I don't know that
And
that
I
last
don't
part can
want,
get worked in here, but
well, I mean, I think the good thing is Lynn is doing both projects, right, for the town. So hopefully she's going to piggyback off that. It's going to be less work for her if she's having one reputable place do the PR for both, right?
I don't think she's working on the PR. That's not what she's been hired to do, in my understanding.
But she's been helping Ryan Donovan, right?
I'm not going to say anything.
Okay. So, I'm trying to think, I agree that it'd be nice if it wasn't a land trust. Not knowing if, Mass Historic or someone else is gonna take it, it's gotta kind of go out and get agreement on who's gonna do this. Just how do you word it that it's, you say, not a land trust?
Subject to the approval of the CPA, which won't be unreasonably withheld. We're not trying to gum up the works here. We just don't want to.
Let's at least try. And if we're told we can't do it.
Yeah.
Well, you go with what Mark just said, subject to the approval of the
Subject to the
CPC.
approval of the CPA, would said approval not to be unreasonably withheld if you really want to.
The Southborough CPA.
The holder to be subject.
To approval by the Southborough CPA. Okay, I like that. And 180 days, is that what we said? After commencement?
After what commencement?
Commencement of construction activities.
Within 180 days?
Yep.
Did you still want to keep that the town has to maintain ownership, Andrew?
Yeah, I want to put that in there for now.
Definitely.
Let's see if they push back on it.
Yeah, I don't know that it's a pushback rather than some things you can't restrict town government in doing.
We lose Dorian.
Oh, she sent a text saying there's a storm down there and her internet's having some real trouble. So that if she drops out, that's what happened.
Okay.
And the town to ownership of the building?
Yeah, the PR and the town will remain owners of the building in perpetuity. See what they say. And are you going to try to talk to Stuart tomorrow, Freddie?
I will.
And
Oh,
can you
tomorrow's
just-
Friday. It may not be to Monday,
Yeah.
but he usually does respond to me, but they don't usually talk to Fridays are not their
Right.
technical day. But
Can you just ask him about that piece too, if that's if he's ever seen that?
and I just want everyone to know, and he would say it, he is not a legal attorney advice. That's up to your town council, but he can guide us a little bit. I just don't want anyone to get the wrong opinion that we think he's providing legal advice, because he's not and he won't.
Right.
So within 180 days, work commencing. I'm going to have to listen to this again. Where's Betsy when you really need her? She's sorry not to be here tonight.
It's a good thing it's all being recorded.
That's what I'm saying.
All right.
All right.
So you
I think I have it.
still need me to share this?
Share this. No, is everyone okay with it the way it was? And then we'll just add this in. And then when it's done, Andrew and I will work on it. I don't know what's on your agenda for your next meeting, but rightfully, you probably should vote on it. Should you?
Yeah.
And I don't know how, I mean, I think they're happy that they know you're going to fund it, but I don't know how critical time-wise Mark is over getting these in, but I don't think we're meeting until, I thought we had like an April 21st date that they're signing the
Yeah. It's not
the
for a while
warrant.
yet.
So I think you have a little time, but I don't know that we picked a date in April, did you? A meeting date?
We don't have another meeting date.
So I think you may want to do that.
All right. April.
Sooner in April than later, so we can approve this and get it off to them.
Freddie, looking at the assessment, it's definitely the facade, the windows, and there's definitely woodworking and window lintels over and above the facade and the windows that should be addressed by the restriction.
So
It should be
I will
the
copy
entire
and
exterior
paste.
of the facade.
I will copy and paste the language from the application, Mark. Would that work?
That's probably, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure you should commit to preserving
Every
the
dovetail
bricks, but
joint.
like the entire exterior might be too, too broad, but I would definitely go beyond simply the windows and the facade, because there's woodworking, there's sandstone window lintels, and a few other things.
So I'll cut and paste.
I think so.
That's good. And then if Lynn comes up with a better explanation of what that is, she can shorten it for them.
That's a good plan. Thank you.
No, thank you.
So next meeting I'm looking at, I see April 8th. That's a Thursday. Ben, do you have a meeting then?
No, I do not. April 1st, we have one. So the 8th, I'm open.
There's a historical commission meeting on April.
Okay.
How about on the Wednesday?
The
I can't
7th?
do the Wednesday or the Tuesday.
Okay. What if we did
Following
the
week?
15th?
15th, I can do.
The 15th, Monday?
15th?
I can do that.
Is it
No,
Thursday?
it's
April
15th is a
15th.
Thursday.
Thursday.
April 15th? Isn't that a special day?
Not this year.
Tax day got moved.
No, it moved.
Does that work for everyone?
Yes.
Yep.
I'm fine with that.
Yes.
Good. Sounds good. I think we went a little out of order here. The MOU, Mark, were you able to do anything with the MOUs? Look at me when you say this.
I looked for it. Is Jen still on this?
Yep,
Yeah.
she is.
Jen very kindly sent to me at my home email, and if I could bother you to do that again, that would.
Yeah. I can do that.
Can I say I had looked at that and I thought there were some areas that didn't really dovetail as well with the types of issues we run into with CPA projects.
Yeah, it was just another example of
Right.
how where else in the town we're doing it. So
How about if, Mark, I have that copy of that and I have a copy of your old one. How about if I cobble something together and send it to you, to then you can have a place to start?
That would work. That would work.
Would that work for you, Andrew?
Yeah,
If
that
I do
works.
that?
Just don't want to lose it from our agenda item. Okay, so cobble it together, and then that'll be. We need 5 for the. Oh no, it's going to be 6 now because no 5 for the projects proposed. Other business before the town. See, I don't think there's anything new from the last time we met that I'm aware of. So the last thing was to adjourn, unless there's something else people have to talk about.
I'm good.
So, is there a motion?
Good.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? David?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
Jennifer?
yes.
Ben?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
And Andrew is a yes. Thank you, everyone. Freddie, again.
Thank you,
for all your
Freddie.
hard work putting that
Thanks.
spreadsheet together, and the time with Carla and everything. I know you spent a lot of time with Brian and all the other attendees this evening. So thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Couldn't do this without you.
Well,
So,
thank you.
appreciate it. All right.
Thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
All right.
Have a